My food is not cheat meal. Tacos can be really healthy. They can be very nutrient dense. They're not a cheat meal. And I'm tired of it. I'm tired of seeing it as a cheat meal. So welcome to my channel, or welcome back. My name is Kat. I'm a licensed and registered dietitian nutritionist and online nutrition coach. And today we are talking about cultural foods and how they can fit in a very healthy lifestyle overall. So let's go ahead and get started. So I've been wanting to make this video for a little while. You're probably not aware of this, but I actually have a podcast that I co-host with Christina Spencer. She is my amazing business partner and part owner of Iron Movement, which is that sports nutrition LLC that we both run. But on the podcast a little while ago, we talked about cultural foods and how those can be incorporated into a healthy diet. Now, the reason why we wanted to talk about this is because there's this kind of idea. Let's say you want to get to a healthier place, right? Like you are intentionally making changes to your intake. And for a lot of people, that can go directly alongside with, I'm gonna have to give up all of these foods and have chicken and rice and broccoli, and like that's it. There's this kind of idea that cheat meals are bad foods, and what's really kind of frustrating for me is that cheat foods a lot of times are very like cultural rich foods. Not all the time, of course. You know, I don't think anybody is really counting that Twinkies and Doritos a part of their culture. Maybe they are, I don't know. But I'm talking more of that historic idea of those foods and the culture within them. There's this kind of idea that these more rich foods, they don't really fit in that healthy lifestyle. An example that I see kind of often is like a lot of Mexican foods, right? Foods that I really grew up on. And this actually happened recently, but somebody who I'm working with, they thought that they wouldn't be able to have their tortillas. And I don't know about you, but for me, that is something that I eat on a regular basis. Flour tortillas, corn tortillas, that is just part of my normal intake. And so there are some people though who come to me and they expect me to say, no, you're not allowed to eat those. And that is not really helpful. If I was to say, you're not allowed to have that anymore, we're only gonna have these other foods, how do you think that would really fit with sustainability? It really doesn't. It doesn't fit that long-term focus. Every video that I talk about, I'm sure some people are tired of hearing it, but I always go back to that definition of health that is physical, mental, social, and emotional well-being. And so if you are doing something that is helping your physical health, but it's harming any of those other areas of health, then it's not truly healthy. And for a lot of people, that includes more of those culturally rich foods that they are used to or that they grew up on. And yes, there are certain cultural foods that might not be the most nutrient dense, they might be very energy dense, but they can still fit into a healthy lifestyle overall. So when we talk about food, there's also this idea, and I used to say it when I was a baby dietitian. I think I said food is fuel on multiple accounts, multiple times. And that's not to say that it's wrong necessarily, but food is so much more than fuel. Food is joy, food is love, food is connection, food is memories, food is experience, food is comfort. There's so much that we can get from food beyond just that fueling piece. One of my favorite things, one of my favorite ideas in the realm of nutrition and just behavior is that when you look at all of the different cultures around the world, we are so different in so many different areas, but one thing that we all have in common together right now and in the past, we all gather around food. Whether it's a happy event or a sad event or a neutral event, we are just gathering around food. And I love that because we're able to see that food is so much more than just that fueling piece. And I think sometimes we can, and I say we as just we overall, like me included, is that we can kind of get away from that more human piece of nutrition and focus in too much on the fueling piece and on the macros and how much should I eat and all of these other things, and sometimes forgetting more of that human piece. But it's really important though to still have that human side within your nutrition, because that is where we're able to build those long-term habits, those long-term sustainable actions that we can continue to do. Because If you are doing a plan and if you can't see yourself doing it for more than a couple months or a year or even 5 years, then there's really not a good point to doing it. Yes, for certain reasons there might be, but for the majority of times when we're looking at implementing healthy actions in our life, it needs to fit within those foods that you really love and those foods that are really important to you and those foods that maybe come up on a regular basis, or even those that are more of, around certain holidays or events. Those foods that connect you to your culture, those are still important, and you don't have to get rid of them in order to be healthy. So we really need to see those foods in a way that we can include them in a healthy lifestyle. And this leads to the idea of seeing food as neutral. Food neutrality is something that I've touched on in other videos, and food neutrality is so important in my opinion when we're trying to build that healthy relationship with food, because food neutrality, it gets people outside of that kind of all or nothing approach, or that kind of binary or black or white kind of ideology around food and whether something is good or bad. Putting individual foods into categories of good or categories of bad is really, it's easy, it's comforting, it sounds great, it seems safe, it feels safe. But when you're looking at more of that long-term approach, we really need to see food as more of that neutral piece. We need to look at that food in the context within multiple science disciplines. So that includes things like anatomy and physiology, biochemistry, right? Like how that food is really going to impact our bodies. And we also need to pair that together with more of those social sciences like anthropology, sociology, psychology. Those are just as important when we're talking about building a plan for you that's sustainable. Those all need to go together, because if we just focus on the fueling piece and the numbers piece, you miss the human side of food and nutrition, and that is not a fun place to be. And you might argue that we really do need to focus only on that biochemistry side, that anatomy and physiology side of the food and the fueling, looking at it as fuel. But I always go back to that definition of health, that physical, mental, social, and emotional well-being. And so if you have social well-being as part of the definition of health that is just as important as that physical well-being, then we really need to take into account those other sciences. All of those are equally as important, and I think that makes life so much fun, and I think that makes my job even more fun, because I'm not just focusing on those numbers and that plan. Really talking about, what does that look like? How does that make you happy? So going back to the idea of seeing food as neutral, one of my favorite exercises, not like physical exercises, but one of the exercises that I love to do with people is looking at the food with neutrality. And so how we do that is by taking out a couple sheets of paper or one sheet of paper. You write down all of the foods that you perceive that is just, those are good foods, healthy foods. Foods that if somebody asked you if it was healthy or not, you would say, yes, it's healthy. And then on either the other side or another sheet, write down all of the bad foods. So foods that if somebody asked you, are they healthy? You would say no. So for most people, they're gonna have like kale on this side. On this side, they're gonna have animal crackers, whatever you come up with. And then in the middle or on another sheet of paper, that's gonna be where we start to see food as neutral. And so you take all of the foods that you listed on your good list and all of the foods that are listed in the bad list, and we put them on this one list, this one paper, and we look at some of the positives of that food and some of the negatives of that food, and what different circumstances could those foods be more positive or more negative. And what that gets that person to do is really to create new kind of thought patterns of approaching food in a way that they are looking at it within the context of the situation. Something else that I like to talk about is how we approach food. I like to do it with 3 C's. Approaching food with compassion, approaching food with curiosity, and approaching food with context. Sometimes people can hear this idea of food neutrality and feel like it really doesn't give them any insight or any guidelines, and we can talk more about specific guidelines for that person. They might feel like they can get a little bit out of control. Perhaps maybe they can overconsume from what they would consider overconsumption on specific foods whenever they are able to see those foods as neutral. And to that goes back to those 3 C's. So one of those C's is compassion. So approaching food with compassion. What I mean by that is with compassion, we're able to have that self-kindness, and self-kindness does not look like something that's going to harm yourself. Self-kindness is not this self-destructive behavior. It's really about making choices and doing actions that really help support you and your overall health, not just that physical piece, but that social, emotional, and mental piece as well. And then another piece of that self-compassion is that common humanity piece, where that just means like seeing yourself as another human being, somebody who doesn't always do things perfectly, but is trying. And then that last piece of that self-compassion being around mindfulness, where we're able to have that non-judgmental kind of self-observation, conscious awareness piece. That mindfulness within that self-compassion piece really helps us to feel and understand, recognize our feelings, and not have it turn into this kind of self-destructive behavior that sometimes people are scared of when they are starting to kind of shed more of those strict dieting rules or dieting rules in general. So we have that self-compassion piece with those 3 little pieces within there. And then the second piece, that having that food neutrality allows us to approach food with beyond the self-compassion, is curiosity. Curiosity as to how you are feeling. What are you craving? What kind of energy levels are you experiencing? What do you want to eat? What kind of even texture of food are you looking for? What kind of feeling after? Even beyond whether you want something savory or sweet, but really how do you want that experience to be, and what is going to be the best option, for you in that time. And even asking, like, if you are hungry, where are you hungry? Are you physically hungry? Are there manifestations of that physical hunger, like low energy or foggy thinking or grumbling stomach, or are you feeling hangry? Or are you having more of that heart hunger? Like just approaching that food with curiosity. And then the last piece, which is context. And this is really important when we're looking at food neutrality, or this is a really important part of that food neutrality piece, because context allows us to choose the best food for us for that situation. Let's say you are running, you're running 5 miles or half a marathon or a marathon. Kale is not going to be the best option. It's not going to be the healthiest option for you. That's not going to physically help you in that moment. But those animal crackers that we just had in that bad food category, those are actually going to be really helpful in that context. I wanted to quickly get on here and clarify, because I feel like it can be a little bit confusing. It can be taken out of context. But you do not need to run a marathon or anything. You don't have to run off animal crackers. This was just the example that I used. If you want some, go ahead. You don't have to work it off or earn it in any way. This was just the example to show in the context what would be a more helpful choice. So you can kind of think about different ideas or different situations. Maybe you have a very long day of running errands and you might not have an opportunity to have a snack, or maybe you know that your next meal is going to be a little bit late, and so maybe before you leave, instead of having your normal size meal, you increase the volume, or maybe you pack a snack with you or something of that nature. But just looking at the context is really important for deciding what kind of food that is best for you in that time, and looking at what you want to get out of that food. So what is the goal of that snack? What is the goal of that meal? So kind of bringing it back to that culture, looking at food as neutral, we're able to see how we can have more of those rich foods. We're able to have those foods that we really enjoy, that bring us comfort even. Side note, it's okay to feel comfort from food. It's okay to enjoy and get joy out of food. We don't just have to have it as fuel. You are allowed to enjoy your food and to receive comfort from your food, from your meal, and from your snack. And so with that, in my experience, I've had many people think that I'm going to take away their more cultural rich foods, and that is not the case. That is absolutely something, that is one of the last things that I want to do, because my whole focus is on that sustainability piece and doing actions that support that whole health piece that I always keep back there. Healthy does not need to mean chicken breast and broccoli and rice. It just doesn't. Even when you look at using lard, sometimes people can be a little bit scared of using lard in their cooking, and at the same time be perfectly fine with using butter, like using Kerrygold butter. When in reality, when you look at the fatty acid profiles, lard actually is mostly unsaturated. It has much less saturated fat than something like Kerrygold butter would. It's just kind of re-looking at food and re-examining some maybe preconceived notions or just kind of ideas of what you considered healthy or not healthy or good or bad. And I know there's going to be somebody in the comments that are going to be like, well, what about trans fats? Like, yes, I would say you're exactly right. Like, if we go back to that definition of health, if you are having a diet of 100% trans fats, or even not that much, but if you are consuming a lot of that, is that really fitting into that definition of health? Is that helping your physical health? Is it more of that self-indulgence does it really fall in line with that self-kindness within that self-compassion? That self-kindness meaning that doesn't mean that it's doing self-destructive behavior, right? So this is looking at that context as a whole and not just getting so laser focused on one thing and just looking at it as actions that support all of those areas of health. And one of the easiest ways, or one of the foundational ways of beginning that, is by having that food neutrality. That food neutrality piece is so important. And that doesn't mean that, you know, spinach is going to have the exact same amount of pros and cons, or positives and negatives, that like a donut would. It's just being able to look at both sides and see, based on the context, based on all of the information, what is best for me in this time, and what is the goal of this snack or this meal. And by goal, I mean, how long do you need it to fill you up? How, you know, satisfying do you want it to be? All of these things, looking at the context. And so kind of wrapping it up with the cultural food side and how you can incorporate those into your life, that fits directly into that food neutrality piece. And honestly, I'm just tired of people going to Mexican restaurants when they want to have a cheat meal, because my food is not cheat meal. Tacos can be really healthy. They can be very nutrient dense. They're not a cheat meal. And I'm tired of it. I'm tired of seeing it as a cheat meal. And I think that lard is a really good example of that. When you look at what is actually in lard, what is the fatty acid profile of that, and that's just one example, but there are tons of other examples. And so with all that being said, go off, enjoy your food, have fun with your food, approach your food with that neutrality, where you're able to approach it with curiosity, with compassion, and with context. All right, I think that's it. I'll see you guys later. Bye. Oh, I forgot to say, if you like this video, please hit like, please subscribe, hit the bell icon, all of that good stuff. I'll see you guys later. Bye.